I'm sure that there's like a God mode type thing for
Oh
people
yeah.
like Sammy, which you can see everything from
Mm-hmm.
everywhere.
It's a good power to have.
Mm-hmm. Stressful.
Well, with that, let's go ahead and get started. I want to go ahead and thank everyone for showing up today. And my name is Manny Corlew. I'm the community manager here at Consensus, and I'm glad to see you all stop by for 3 ways to measure and implement buyer velocity with Matt Lauer. DemoFest is presented by Consensus. Consensus is leading the world into the new era of demo automation. Our platform gets your buyers what they need when they need it, and then multiplies your revenue team's impact with unique insights on those buyers. As a result, you'll see faster close times, larger deals, and higher close rates. You can learn more at goconsensus.com or view the automated micro link in the docs tab on the right of the screen. We encourage you to participate with us today. There's a few ways that you can. So if you look on the right side of the screen in the chat function, that's going to allow you to engage with us as well as other attendees. Our speaker is going to be taking questions at the end of the presentation, but I always want to encourage everyone during the time when you have those burning questions, go ahead and head over to the QA section, and that's going to allow you to drop in some questions with us. And if at any time you're having some technical difficulties, click on that gear at the bottom of the screen, and it's going to take you to a help document that's going to help troubleshoot some of those common issues you might be facing. And with that, I just want to introduce our speaker. Matt Lauer is a senior revenue operations manager at Consensus, which oversees the RevOps department and all things data, process, and systems related to the revenue funnel. Matt got his start in politics at a 501c4 nonprofit, becoming the system admin for the entire organization within a year and director of the membership programs a year after that. Matt then went on to get his MBA from George Mason University and transitioned out of politics into marketing and revenue operations, which he has been doing for the last 9 years. And with that, I want to turn over the rest of the time to Matt. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Manny, and good to see everyone here today. So yes, my name is Matt Lauer. It's an unfortunate name to share with a disgraced NBC host, but we're going to be talking about something completely different than that. And that is what's called 3 ways to measure and implement buyer velocity. And I should probably share my presentation before we get too far into this. So hopefully everyone can see 3 ways to measure and implement buyer velocity. And that probably sounds like a lot of word gobbledygook to all of you. So I promise by the end of this, we'll explain what that means and specifically how it can affect you, whether you're in pre-sales, sales, marketing, just in B2B SaaS, or you like data. And I promise, I hope, that the way that we're presenting this data will be fun, engaging, interesting, and I welcome lots of questions. And also, if you are able to participate in the chat, there will be a quiz at one point. I encourage people to type in the chat and be interactive, and not just at the end for the Q&A, but anytime before that point too. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So what are the goals for today? Four primary goals we want to get out of this conversation, hopefully that you all come away with. So first is explaining why and what buyer velocity is and why it matters. Secondly, getting into why, this will become a little bit of a leading question, but why buyer actions are greater than selling actions when we're talking about buyer velocity. We're going to show some example metrics from our own use case here in Consensus that really work for measuring this buyer velocity. And then finally discussing how it can be implemented at your company, other companies. Obviously, it takes a little bit of massaging to work with your type of selling, your type of business. But at the very least, this should hopefully get people thinking and you thinking about what this looks like when it's actually implemented. And so let's dive in to why does buyer velocity matter? And again, you're all probably like, what is it? What is buyer velocity? What is this hodgepodge of words you're throwing together? Well, let's just think about it. There's 2 words in buyer velocity. And so we'll break it out. We've got velocity, which is just the speed and direction of something. And then buyer, I think we all know what a buyer is. The person that we're trying to sell to, we're trying to get interested in our product, we're hoping is going to buy from us. So our buyer velocity is what the speed and direction of a buyer's actions are. And if that doesn't hit home, let's just think about it in terms of one of my favorite TV shows growing up, which is Top Gear. So it's speed and power, as Jeremy Clarkson would be saying. It's how fast are these buyer actions occurring? What's their power behind it? What's their weight behind it? And also, it's just fun to watch, as he's driving the Ariel Atom and seeing his face get plastered back. So anyway, we'll continue back on. And now here's the quiz. So I hope everyone is in speed. That's right, Mark, speed. So we're about to do a quiz. So hop on over to the chat, get your fingers ready. So it's very easy. Just 2 choices, all right? And these might be leading questions. We'll see. So question, what is a better indicator of buyer interest? Is it how many emails the seller, and the seller is the seller, or how many emails the buyer sent? Okay, everyone here is saying the correct B word. Even the option is leading. You're right, B. Buyer sent. How many emails did the buyer send, right? All right, same question, but different answers. Again, what's a better indicator of buyer interest? How many calls the seller initiated or how many calls the buyer initiated? A, B. Hopefully no one says C. If you say C, then I really don't think you're paying attention. All right, so we're seeing B. All right, good. So far, I haven't seen anyone get less than 100%. We're going to ask another question. Same one. Different answers again. What's a better indicator of buyer interest? How many automated demos the seller sent or how many automated demos the buyer watched? Well, I think you all are getting bored at this question, but that's fine. We're going to keep going. We got another one. What's a better indicator of buyer interest? How many meetings the seller asked for, which is usually infinite, or how many meetings the buyer showed up to? Which one is it? There's got to be an A coming up, Mark. Well, how about you just guess A, and then we'll see if you still get 100%. So final question, same question, 5th time I'm asking it. What's a better indicator of buyer interest? Seller actions or buyer actions? If it's not clear yet, we'll make it really clear, right? Why does this make intuitive sense? Well, first of all, we said buyer interest. You can send 1 billion emails off to someone. And does that make a difference if they never respond? If a salesperson sends 1 million emails, does the tree in the forest? Anyway, you get the metaphor. Right, it's buyer actions. Buyer actions are what we care about. That's what we're looking for. That's what we should look for gauging a buyer's interest. And so now, what do we measure? Like, we've got an idea. We now need to care about what the buyer's doing. But we need to understand, what do we measure? How do we even measure buyer velocity? Do we just put our finger up in the wind and say, well, it seems like they're moving quickly. It seems like they're in the Ariel Atom with Jeremy Clarkson and their face is plastered back, or it's just not moving because it's broken. So I'll come up with another question. I hope you all are still engaging and asking it. But what's the most valuable thing a buyer can give you? Aside from money. What's the most valuable thing a buyer can give you? Information. A signed contract. A contract that's the same as money, guys. Signed contract means you get their money. They're paying. Yeah, there we go. Mark Green getting it. He had the right answer, so he gets the money. He gets the accolades, but it's their time. Their time. Also their money, but more importantly, their time. Like, if we get their time, it means we're getting valuable hours or minutes out of their day. And so that's the start. We're going to think about what time are they able to give us. If they're able to give me $1 million, I will happily take it, and I'll say that they're willing to buy. But their time is something that we can see and look at before we get to the stage of exchanging money. So let's just think about how much time your buyer is giving you depending on what they're doing. So let's think about an email. If your buyer sends back an email to you, the average email takes 2 minutes to draft and send. I know that's probably oversimplifying, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it's as short as, we're not ready to buy yet, or I'm not interested, or stop bothering me, or why are you showing up to my house again? Whatever that email is, it can be quick. So 2 minutes, email doesn't really communicate that. You could obviously have a really important email, but it's a small amount of time. And it tends to be between one person. Sometimes you've got a large email, large group, but typically it's one email, just a few minutes. And then let's think about video, whether this is automated video or just something you watch on the website. So typical videos, they can be anywhere from a minute, 2 minutes. Hopefully we're not in TikTok land, but it can be 5 to 15 minutes. So if you have consensus or you have sent out videos, think about how long those videos tend to be. I think our micro demo on our website, and Mark Green will be able to come in and tell us this, it's about 12 minutes if you select everything. And this video, now we get into another part that goes to one person, but it could go to 10 people, or that one person could share it to another 9 people. And so if you think about a 10-minute video being watched by 6 people, you've now had an hour's worth of time invested from that company. And that's a lot compared to the 2 minutes you got from an email reply. But the gold standard for time is usually a meeting. If you get a meeting with someone, they're at least 15 minutes. They're probably upwards of 60 if you have a really long one, like an implementation call. And you often get 1, maybe up to 10 people on there. Maybe you get more people in that meeting, but you get a lot of people. So if we've got a 30-minute meeting and we had 5 people on it, you've got 3 hours worth of time from that company that happened just in a very short period of time. So when you're thinking about the time investment here, and we're going to start talking about metrics to measure buyer intent and what that actually means for close rates and all that good stuff, keep this in mind. Email, very low on the list because it's a very low time investment. Video, more, not quite all the way, but it could go viral and become very important. And then finally, meetings. They're giving up a slot in their calendar, which is very valuable time. So we're going to go through 3 specific buyer velocity ideas. And the first one shouldn't be a surprise. It's meetings with buyers. And so now we're going to get into some of the statistics to say, well, if you meet with a buyer, what happens? Does it mean you get a better close rate, worse close rate, less time in stage? Like, what happens when you start meeting with people? And so let's start with an easy one. How many meetings did you? So let's take an opportunity. Let's say I'm selling a widget. Let's say I'm selling Consensus to I don't know, like the U.S. government. I'm asking for $1 billion or something like that. I don't know. How many meetings do we have on people who are part of that opportunity? Well, you'd assume that goes up when you're thinking about win rate. So this was our own data that we pulled from. And so when you're looking at total meetings, that's the x-axis. And then the win rate is the y-axis. We all want 100%, but I don't think anyone gets there. So when you think about total meetings, 1 or less, very low win rate, teens percentages. And then 2 to 4 goes up a little bit. 5 to 8, you go up by about almost 2x. And then 9 plus, you go up almost 4x. And I hear you all clamoring in the chat, even though you're not saying it. I hope you're thinking it. Of course, Matt. Of course, the win rate goes up as you get more meetings. It takes longer. You're meeting with them, especially if it's an enterprise deal. You usually don't sign a tens of thousands of dollar or $1 billion contract in one meeting. We wish, but that tends not to be the case. So this seems like a dumb statistic, but it's setting the groundwork for meetings do have a direct correlation to win rate. So let's think about it from maybe a different perspective. Let's think about the timing of a meeting. So when we say timing of the meeting, we're thinking about, let's say today, I open up an opportunity with, I don't know, Mark Green Incorporated. He started his new company, Mark Green Incorporated. How many weeks into that opportunity when I have a meeting with him, what does the win rate look like? So the green means you had a win, red means you didn't. So if we're at the first week of when the opportunity is open and we meet with them, yeah, close rate, win rate's about 15, 20%, something like that, right? But as we see, by the time you're meeting with them 3 weeks into this this opportunity's existence, you see the win rate double. And again, I hear you saying, Matt, of course, duh, like the deal's still open. But I challenge you, think about all of the deals, especially if you're in B2B and in your pipeline. How many deals do you have or opportunities do you have that are open, which are still open despite the fact that there hasn't been a meeting with anyone at that company for over a month? It's probably a lot. Hopefully not a lot. Hopefully you're cleaning up your pipeline. But if there is a lot, that shows you, if you're able to get more meetings further into the time where the deal is open or the opportunity is open, your win rate goes up. So this definitely reflects if you have a good first meeting, but you don't follow it up with anything else, you got a problem. Your win rate's probably not going to go up. It's going to stay stagnant or probably lose. So this data, when first ran it, it was like, okay, this is somewhat interesting. This is okay. But we really want that killer stat that shows meetings matter, but also how specifically do meetings matter? What should we be striving for? Obviously, we want to have as many meetings as possible, but what are we going to strive for to make this work? Well, let's look at frequency. So now we're not talking about total meetings. We're not even talking about when in the cycle. We're saying if a deal was open for 8 weeks and you had 2 meetings throughout that time, you averaged about 1 meeting a month. If you had 8 meetings in an 8-week deal cycle, you had 1 about every week. And we're like, all right, hopefully this is the silver bullet to really show that something is driving. What about meetings? What drives it? This really blew our socks off when we were looking at it. So again, frequency of meetings is the x-axis. The win rate is on the y-axis. If you're at monthly or worse, 10, 15% close rate. Not that great. But when you get to bi-weekly, that is to say every other week having a meeting, all of a sudden your win rate 2.5x's to a not insignificant like 33%. I think any salesperson, I would love to see in the comments, if you're a salesperson, would you like to have at least a 33% win rate? That sounds pretty good to me. Again, I know we all want 100, but at least 33%. That's spectacular. But then we get to almost weekly, which is to say you meet with them, maybe not every week, but you're meeting with them more than once every 2 weeks. All of a sudden we're up 4.5 times and we're over 50% win rate. Well, now I assume all account executives are leaping out of their chairs to say, yes, I would love to have that kind of close rate. But if you can get to a weekly or better frequency of meetings, it's almost 5.5 times better than doing a monthly meeting. So 5.5 times, we're knocking on 70% win rates. And this is just frequency of meeting. So if you're going into it and you're just trying to measure buyers' intent, velocity, all that stuff, if you're getting a weekly meeting with them, that alone is just a single indicator would tell you things are going really well. And if your radio silence, crickets, they're like, oh, maybe I'll meet with you 2 months from now and never more than that, you're going to have a problem. So this was the very first, very easiest indicator that said frequency of meetings matters. And let's look at that as the recap. So win rates, frequency. That is number one that we saw. If you can get that frequency of meeting as close to weekly or better as possible, you're going to see win rates skyrocket to stage it to levels that anyone would drool over. And then obviously, if you have a win rate and you're able to get a meeting further into the deal cycle. So let's say you get that second meeting in the 3rd or 4th week, and then you get the 3rd meeting in the 5th week. You're going to double your win rate from the baseline. Again, doubling win rate's pretty impressive alone. Excuse me. And then finally, if you can get more than 5+ meetings, you see win rates really go up as well. So if you're a salesperson, pre-sales, whatever it might be, and you're thinking, how do I make sure, or how do I measure just how well is this deal going? Are you meeting with them weekly? Have you met with them more than the first week it came into existence? And are you racking up the total number of meetings? If you're doing all those things, you're in great shape. Great shape. But now we got to get into the second measurement. So we did the first one. And hopefully people can guess what the second one is. Have you heard of consensus? Hopefully you have. If you haven't, you should learn. Automated demo views, not just videos, but our automated demo views. Because the background is when we were trying to build a predictive scoring model, I started with meetings, and that Mark Green guy is going to come up again. He's like, well, why don't we have automated demo views in here? And I don't have a British accent, but just imagine that it's in a British accent. And I was like, wow, how did I miss that? We should probably include that. So after like a week of work and so, we got those added. And I was like, great, now let's actually test to see if these are worth it. And it would be really awkward if I look at it, I'm like, yeah, automated demo views don't have any impact on buyer intent or velocity or any of that. Thankfully, they do. Spoiler alert. And it's I didn't have to have an awkward conversation with the entire leadership team. So I think everyone knows what an automated demo view is at this point, but This is just a GIF, however people say it, of what it looks like, especially on our main website. So our micro demo, you're going through here, you're selecting all the things you're interested in. There's Mark Green again. If you haven't heard, Mark Green frequently comes up here. And then you fill out a form, and now you've at least seen the marketing demo. And obviously, if you're doing this on a sales, you just send it to that specific person, and they're able to watch the demo, select them what they're interested in. And so we were like, okay, well, let's see how demo views influence buyer velocity and close rates and all that good stuff. So let's just start at what worked for meetings, which is frequency. So the frequency of watches. And I don't think I could have faked a data set with a better numbers. I promise I didn't. But again, we're going to look at this graph. This is x-axis, the total number of demo views. Y-axis is the win rate. And this is for any demo view of any length of any person that was remotely related to the deal or the opportunity, including people we didn't have on the opportunity, but then watched it and were discovered as a stakeholder that were then added. So we start here at 0, the very sad deal that has no consensus demo watch, and it has a single-digit win rate. So get those demo views up. You get 1 demo view, you doubled your win rate already. Just like that. You doubled it. Now we're at least in double digits. Now, 1 person watching it, good enough. But what about getting 2 to 4 watches? And again, this could be 4 people watching it once or 1 person watching it 4 times. Any direction. When you do that, suddenly we're almost 5xing the win rate. If you just get 2 to 4 demo views, and this is across all of our net new logos that we were looking at for, I think it was a full year of data observation. And then if you get to 5 to 8, which is starting to get into that virality, you're now at 6.2 and 40% win rates. Again, a lot of people would love to see that. And then if you get 9+ demo views, you have 10x your win rate. 10x. Again, I thought I faking a data set. I almost thought that the data set was fake when I ran this because it will look too good. 10xing your win rate when you get 9+ demo views. That's what we've seen with our own empirical data. Now you might be thinking, okay, well, that's great, but what about the big boys, the enterprise people, those with 1,500 or more employees? What does this graph look like? So let's look at it for frequency of demo view watches at an enterprise level. Again, we're defining enterprise as 1,500 employees or more. It's the same graph, just with a little bit of further kick out. So 1 demo view doesn't really change anything, but 2 to 4, again, we saw it about 2x. 5 to 8, 5.5x. 9+, 8x. These are on enterprise deals. These are the big boys, the lots of money, the ones where we're trying to get billions and billions of dollars from. I wish. But it's at 8x, and we're talking well over a 50% win rate. This is just demo views. This is just if you get a couple more demo views here. And let's think of another proxy for virality. So this is just the number, but what if the same person is watching it 9 times? That's great. They're really enthusiastic. They love what we want. But let's just try and measure virality of this demo through an organization. And so that's when we talk about stakeholders discovered. So a very nice aspect about consensus is that if you share a demo with someone at let's say I am selling to Mark Green Inc., right? I send a demo to Mark Green and he's like, this is amazing. And he sends it out to 10 of his favorite British friends within his company, obviously. And they start watching it. We'll start discovering those additional stakeholders who are watching the demo. And so that is the definition of a stakeholder discovered, is let's say one of Mark's bestest buddies watched this. That's one stakeholder that's been discovered beyond just the person we sent this to. So at first, when I thought I was going to have to run, okay, what's the win rate correlation based off of this? I thought I was going to have to create different buckets and all that stuff. And the data saved me the time because all I had to do was make one bucket, which was, has anyone been discovered? Just anyone. Did we send it once and one other person saw it from it being shared? If it happened once, it was over a 6x win rate increase from none. Again, well over 50% win rate, just boom. We have what looks like a crypto chart back in 2020 or 2021. not the inverse of it, the like crypto chart like this, just skyrockets. So you get one stakeholder discovered, which is a very small proxy of virality. If you get 10, 20, whatever it is, but all it takes is one, and suddenly your win rate is skyrocketing. And that's something which is a lot harder to do with meetings, because that has to be timed and you have to coordinate calendars. This is just simply sending one and then having it permeate through the rest of the organization. But 6.5, a little over 6.5 times the win rate if you just get someone discovered. And now we're going to talk about another concept. This was the last way that we measured demo views and their effectiveness, and that's average days per stage. Now, you might be wondering, what is an average day per stage? This sounds like gobbledygook. I put together a graphic to kind of explain it, because at the end of the day, if we're trying to measure the acceleration in the pipeline of how quickly something's closing, some deals take a long time and some deals take a shorter amount of time because they close lost earlier. And so what this does is it tries to adjust for how many stages you went through. So for the example and how we do it at Consensus, let's take an example of, okay, we've got this opportunity that opened up. So on day one, we opened up this opportunity. And we have, let's say, 5 total stages before you get to close win. So qualified opportunity. And then on day 20, it hit stage 2. And on day 50, it hit stage 3. And on day 80, it hit stage 4. And it went through all these different stages. And then, hooray, it closed on day 100. The deal was won. So we went through 4 stages, whatever those stages are, fill in the blanks, however your organization does it, like business case, or let's say you get to red lines or whatever it is. So you went through 4 stages and it took 100 days. So think about this. It's the average days per stage of this deal was 25, because in 100 days, you went through 4 stages, which is 25. Hopefully that's relatively easy math. Now, conversely, let's look at an opportunity that didn't succeed. So this was one on day 1, it was qualified. Awesome. We got it to stage 2 on day 20, just like the other deal. But then they ghosted us. They didn't watch any of our demos. They didn't meet with us again. And, 80 days passed and it's like, yeah, okay, we just got to close this out. It's dead. It's not going to happen. In that situation, it was 100 days, but it only went through 2 stages, the qualification stage and the second stage. So the days per stage are 50. So you can see here that if we're going to use this metric, it was quicker. So even though they both took exactly the same amount of time, 100 days, the winning one had to go through more stages, had to go through more qualification, more work to get to deal 1 as opposed to deal lost. So this is how you can adjust for win rates and how long something is in cycle. So keep that in mind. Average days per stage is however many days it takes, divide by the total number of stages you go through, equals your average days per stage. And obviously you want that as small as possible, short as possible. So we then looked at demo views, but we laid it over average days per stage. And so in this graph, the x-axis is how many employees that company had. So we're trying to segment it based on the size of the company, because enterprise deals take longer than small business deals, right? Now the red bar are deals that didn't go in, they closed lost, and they had 0 demo views, none, zip nada. The green is stuff that won and had at least a single demo view. And the graph shows average days per stage. So again, you want lower days per stage. It means that you were moving through the funnel faster. Excuse me. And you see, for small businesses, it was an 85% reduction in the number of days per stage when you had a demo view for something that closed won compared to no demo view. If you look at the mid-market businesses, 150 to 1,500 employees, it was a 77% reduction. And I get these numbers could be high because you don't clear out your pipeline nearly as effectively, but still, this is using data that we auto-close stuff after a certain period of time. So we're seeing these massive accelerations in the deal stage. And even at the enterprise level, it was a 30% reduction in average days per stage if they had a demo view or more. And so if you average across all of it, it was a 63% decrease in days per opportunity stage when you had a demo view, which means if you lose and it takes 30 days per stage, if you get a demo view, it's only going to take 10. I think everyone would prefer the 10 versus 30. And so all across this data we saw, the signal was clear. You 10x your win rates when you have 9+ demo viewed on an opportunity. You 6x your win rates when you discover at least one new stakeholder. And if you get a demo watch, you see the number of days per stage get cut by 2/3. Hopefully that has sold you on automated demos. It's not supposed to be a sales pitch, but the data speaks for itself. This is another way, in addition to how you're using meetings, to do an amazing amount of work in measuring buyer velocity, but also just measuring what the effectiveness is. And so that gets us to our third metric. It's a little bit cheating. What is our third metric? Well, why don't we put them together? They're both statistically significant. They both tell an amazing story. They both say, listen, get your meetings, get your demo views, things happen. In fact, get your meetings more frequent and more numerous, and your demo views, which is to say more demo views and more stakeholders added. And to make it really simple, good things happen. You get lower sales times, higher close rates. But we showed a lot of charts, and you don't want to have to show this to a salesperson every single day when you're trying to tell them what they need to do next. And so this gets into the implementation aspect, which is how do we even implement this? We got all these cool pieces of data. And as Doug, our CEO, always likes to say after I show him really cool, fancy data, it's like, okay, then what are we going to do? What is this going to influence? What's next step? So how are we going to implement this? How do you implement all of this crazy data for leaders and frontline managers and our salespeople and all of that? How do we implement this? Well, us at Consensus, we did implement it. We started in November, and we're going to detail that. Now, this is not what you do. You don't just slap up a graph and draw a bunch of lines and try and do technical analysis and be like, no, trust me, bro, this is true. It's working. Look at all the lines. And you start sounding like these people. And I'm sure that when I get into this, all of the people who listen to me talk are like, yeah, no, you're definitely, Always Sunny in Philadelphia, a guy with the crazy hair and the lines and stuff like that. So I have to temper it, say, how can we make this more digestible? How can we make this, in a word, simpler? And that's what we get to. How do we implement this, all of this good information, into a framework that data nerds like myself aren't the only people that can benefit from? And how can we make this in real time? And how can we actually act on it? And so I propose a three-step simple framework for how to implement these pieces of data. And that's, first, make it simple to understand. So like I showed a bunch of graphs. Some of it I'm sure was a little dense at times, but you got to make it simple and understand. So how can we take all of this noise and make it into something very easily digestible? And then second, how can you automate this? Because nothing is worse than telling your sales folks or your pre-sales folks, or your client success individuals, your marketing team that, listen, we've got this cool product and software, but you have to go into the CRM every single day and fill out a number. Or you got to make sure that you copy your calendar invites and make sure they're directly on. You got to copy them word for word into the CRM. Like, none of that's going to happen. You got to have this automated in some way, shape, or form so that the data is just coming in. You don't have to worry about people not doing the right thing. And then finally, it's got to be simple to act on. So you make it understandable, you make it automated, but then if a frontline worker looks at this number and says, okay, well, great, awesome, it's a low number, what do I do now? It needs to be intuitive to say, it's a low number because of these things, and therefore I should do these things in response. So that's the framework. And so here at Consensus, what did we do? Because we have this cool data, we have this interesting data, we got to act on it, and we can't just keep throwing charts in front of our sales team, our CS team, and the CEO's face. Like, how are we going to make this easy to understand? So here's what we did. The first is that we made it a score, a simple number. It was originally 0 to 100, but just like everything with inflation, it went up to 120. Just because we added a few other things that I'm not going to talk about, at least in the time here. But 0 to 120. And it's not a golf score. So the higher the number, the better. The lower the number, especially 0, very not good. Very not good. So we made it score-based, something that's easy to understand. We also limited the number of metrics. So I know everyone loves AI and everyone loves big data models. We purposely kept the number of things in this metric to be really small. So we didn't have 20 different data points. In fact, it's like 6. But for the purposes of what we're talking about, we're going to focus on the two big ones, meetings and demos. Meetings and demos, because as we saw, those have a significant impact on buyer velocity and intent and all that good stuff. And then third, we weighted it. So just like we did with the time exercise, we all can write emails very quickly. And now with OpenAI and all of that, you could just tell AI to be like, write a breakup email, and then it writes it and you put it in there. So emails should not have the same weight as a 10-person meeting you have with high-level VPs at a company that you're at the closing stages of closing a deal with. So you got to weight these different things, put different weights on them. Fourth, it's got to be time limited. So a meeting that you hold with a VP of pre-sales yesterday doesn't have the same impact as a meeting with a VP of pre-sales 9 weeks ago. So you have to do some sort of time limiting. And so what we did specifically was we said this number is only going to look at the past 7 days or the future 7 days if you have something scheduled. That's it. And as we mentioned already, automated, but we use HubSpot. And the nice part about HubSpot is if I want to have meetings automatically recorded, it already does that. If we want to have our demo views automatically logged on the deal, and if you have HubSpot and you have Consensus, we now have an integration coming for that. And so you can get that done automatically. And all of this is automated. So the score is automated. It's automatically putting itself together. No action needs to be done manually by our reps or even our data people. And then finally, this is only good if you can look at it historically. So even though we take these snapshots in real time, every week we were logging for a deal, what was our score? And then you can look at a time series and say, what has been our score for this deal over the last 3 months? Is the velocity increasing or is it decreasing? And specifically, in the term I'll start using is what we named it, which is something called deal momentum. Now, you all haven't been active in the chat lately, so what I'm going to ask is, and I don't think you were expecting this, who can tell me what the formula for momentum is in physics? I want to see who's the physics grad here. Who's the physics grad? And don't Google it. Don't ask OpenAI. I know this is probably bringing up like 10th grade nightmares, but what's the formula for momentum? Oh, come on. Someone's got to know this. Fine. Someone furiously Google this. There we go. Yeah, there we go. Mass times velocity. A squared plus B squared. Joel, you nailed it. Exactly. Quadratic. There you go, Ty. Yeah. No, y'all are... Mark and Jacob, you both sent it about the same time. It is mass times velocity. So we were talking about buyer velocity, right? Well, momentum is just the velocity times the mass. And for us, the mass of something is, what is it? If a meeting is like a really excellent indicator of buyer intent, that should be weighted higher than an email. And so if you're getting a lot of those in a row and they're meetings, you have a very high momentum score. So when you add up all of these things by their weight and by how frequently they're happening, you have a momentum of your deal. And so let's look at what an example deal looks like. So here's a timeline, all right? On week 1, we created the deal, and the deal came into existence because someone watched our automated demo. That's all they've done so far. They get 30 points. Doesn't matter if they watched it 200 times or one time. If you watch it at least once, you get your 30 points. You get no more than that for that specific thing. So your momentum on this deal is 30. Awesome, 30. I'm sure you're all like, I don't even know what these numbers mean. Trust me, we'll get there. But think of it 30. And again, we know what the score range is. It could go up to 120. So in the back of your mind, you should be like, okay, 30 out of 120. People won't do math like that, but it's like 25%. So we're 25% of the way there to a perfect score. Okay, so that means I can do more, but they are watching the demos. Awesome. Then in the second week, we get them to schedule a meeting sometime later this week. Awesome. So we get 40 points because of a meeting scheduled in the future. And we also got them to watch another demo this week. So now you do 40 plus 30 and you get a 70. Now 70 momentum out of 120. We're doing real good. We're doing real good. That's awesome. And you see the momentum's getting higher. We went from 30 to 70. So we're building momentum. That's a really good sign. Now we had that meeting. It's over. And curiously, they didn't watch any more demos. We shared with them a demo, but they didn't watch it and they didn't share it with anyone, or we haven't seen that they watched it. And we don't have a future meeting scheduled. So we get 30 points because we just had a meeting, but there's no demo view. There's no nothing. There's no stakeholders discovered. So we only have a 30 momentum. If you're a rep, you should be looking at this and saying, I need to do something. I need to do something. We're not there yet. Like I need to get something going. I need to get another meeting. I need to get a demo view. I need to send them more demos. I need to check in on them. And that would be good to do because then on week 4, nothing happens. There's no meeting scheduled. There's no demo view. There's no nothing. All of a sudden that activity has gone to 0 and our momentum is 0. And that should be a huge red flag. It means that deal, the buyer doesn't have any velocity. There's not the intent there. This is trouble. We need to start reaching out and figuring out what's going on. And so you can average all of these momentum scores. So 30 plus 70 plus 30 plus 0 divided by 4, you're at 32. And that's a really interesting figure because you can now start measuring what your average deal momentum is. And you can also see the trend. Is your momentum slowing? In which case you need to fix it. Is your momentum accelerating? In which case you need to stomp on the gas and keep that up. So at the end of the day, did we achieve our framework for implementing this? Well, we made it a simple scale. It inflated, but not by much, to 120. We have very few indicators. So you know if you're low on your score, I need to get more meetings. I need to get demo views and a few other things. But those are the 2 core things that I need to get. And it's also really easy to audit. So if you're a salesperson, you're like, why is my deal at a 0? This is a problem. You can go in and say, oh, because I didn't have a meeting this week. I don't have a meeting next week. And they haven't watched a demo in 3 weeks. I need to focus on this. Second, is it simple to automate? Yeah, we automatically record the data in HubSpot. We automatically calculate the score and we automatically record it week over week. That makes it pretty simple. So very little intervention needs to be done from an operations standpoint. And then finally, is it simple to act on? Well, as I just alluded to, if your score is 0 and you know that meetings and demo views are the biggest weight contributor to getting your number up, you're going to focus on getting meetings and getting demos viewed. And you're going to do it this week. You're not going to wait for 3 weeks or 4 weeks down the line because this is only looking a week ahead. It means you need to get on this ASAP, right away. That's the framework we implemented. And there was a nice little kicker at the end of all of this. So I took this data, I retroactively looked at a 1.5 years worth of deal data within Consensus. I was like, well, if we say that this score reflects things that lead to higher close rates and win rates, then presumably it can predict if a deal is going to close based off of what its momentum is. So that's what we did. It is predictive. And this is what the graph looks like. And again, stats, people are having nightmares, go back to their college statistics days. I will explain it. So on the y-axis or x-axis, it's your average momentum. So if you remember back, add up all the weekly momentum numbers, 30 plus 70 plus 30, etc. That's what your average momentum is. So deal opens, deal closes, total up all of those, average it. Remember, it maxes out at 120. 0 is very bad. The y-axis is what the win rate is, and the blue is the predicted win rate based off of what your momentum is. So in the blue line here, if it's in this red zone, you have a 20% or worse win rate. If you go from a deal average momentum about 17 up to, what is this, about 30, you're somewhere between 20 and 40% win rate. And then if you have an average momentum of about 35 or higher, you're 40+% win rate, which again, that's world class. If you can get to 40+% win rate, you are doing something right. And instinctively, we understand that, let's say we had a deal and it started off and you had a great first meeting, but then they kind of went silent for 2 weeks. And your average momentum is now at 10 because there's been very little activity. You know, right then and there, the win rate's only about 13%. That's the projected win rate. And it's calculating real time. If you don't get this number up, it's going to keep getting worse and you should probably just close it. But let's say this rep, through Herculean effort, gets that next meeting scheduled. So they get 30, 40 points for that. Suddenly their average momentum has gone up. It's now 18. Your win rate's gone up to 20%. And then let's say they start getting a weekly meeting with them, or maybe an infrequent weekly meeting, or maybe they have a demo view start to go viral inside the organization. And suddenly their average momentum's up at 29. Now their win rate's at 40%. And if they keep that up and they get that weekly recurring call, and suddenly we're getting 10, 12 demo views per week, which we have seen before in deals that suddenly really accelerate, you suddenly have an average momentum 40, which a 40 average momentum is either having a meeting every other week or a demo view watched. That's it. That's all you have to do. And now all of a sudden your win rate's at 70%. And this is all data borne out by what we've seen in our own deals for a very large sample size. And once we implemented this in November and we started looking at deals, it was predicting the monthly close rate exceptionally accurately, just looking at the average momentum across all the deals. Again, very simple framework. This wasn't OpenAI doing a billion calculations a second. This is just meetings, demo views. That's it. Those two things. There are a few others, but those are the big factors. And so as you're thinking about this, like, cool, awesome, Matt, where can we take this? It's a framework that you can apply to, like, let's say lead scoring. So within a consensus demo view, you can mark what's very important, what's not important. We're going to be looking at how much weight do you get if you mark, let's say, I want a consensus overview platform and it's not important. What's the weight? If they check that, does it mean their buyer intent's lower compared to if they mark this as very important? That's going to be something that we're going to start measuring and seeing what the impact is. And then same for retention and expansion. So start looking at your usage data for a certain company. That's what we do. We look at the consensus usage data for each of our companies and say, how are they performing versus their own benchmark? Are they improving? Are they not improving? Trying to keep it simple. And if we see they're improving, then we can start predicting that this is an expansion opportunity, or God forbid, in the reverse case, they might be contracting or churning and we got to get on them ASAP. And so when you're thinking about buyer velocity, when you're thinking about implementing this, just keep it as this basic framework. Simple to understand, simple to automate, simple to act on. And if you really focus on things that matter and keep it simple, especially in this buyer velocity, excuse me, when we're talking about meetings and demo views, it can be incredibly powerful. And so I hope that this was interesting. The data wasn't too dense, and happy to take any questions that people have with our remaining 12 minutes.
Matt, I think they're just in awe of how you the story and how the numbers are essentially the guiding principles now that people can be data centric about their sales motion. And so I encourage everyone to ask questions. He's ready.
I get it, Mark. I assaulted with numbers. So if there's anything in particular to take from it, it's demo views matter, meetings matter, and however you can map it, you don't need some neural network to do it. You can start simple.
Well, as they take some time to come up with their questions, because they're still gathering, if you mind, I'm going to share my screen really quickly, go through some of our closing slides, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time going through some QA, give them a moment, because we're starting to get some questions come in. I just want to remind everyone that if you're enjoying your time here at DemoFest, we are going to be on the road again for DemoFest X. We had a great time in San Francisco in February, and we can't wait to bring the event to London and New York City again later this year. I just want to remind everyone, if you want to register for these events, you can go to demofest.com or the link at the docs tab on the right. And I also want to encourage you, while you're looking around the site, go to our expo hall and visit our premier partners of DemoFest. Remember, there's no transfer of money involved, so all of our partners have gone above and beyond to contribute to making this event a success for you. And after we finish our Q&A session, I'm just going to remind you that our closing keynote session is coming up, and with that, I'm going to start queuing up some questions for you. First question comes in. What does your momentum scoring not include that you wish it did?
Yes. So one thing that we are working on, that I'm actively working on, is seeing if we can. So within Consensus, when you share a demo, we're currently logging if someone you shared it with watched it, but we can also log if how many people you shared it to. So what we really want to do is start measuring how many shares has this demo received, absent of any views, just to measure if it's a lot of shares with 0, does that mean it should be a lower momentum score? Or even does it just mean if this person shared the Consensus demo within their org to 1, 2, 10 people, does that have a correlative effect for close rates? And that data, we're still trying to pull it together. So I really wish I had that data and was able to run it today, but we're just not quite there yet. And that would be number one on my list to get. But other than that, things like email, things like calls, we've measured those and they have a much smaller effect. So a lot of what we don't include in momentum is actually on purpose. So for instance, when we first built it, and part of the reason it was at 100 before it was at 120 is because we did not count emails in any capacity, except for in like the final stage. So we were really trying to look at only things that had a high enough time investment, as we talked about earlier. So we did introduce some like very basic email stuff. It's like 5 points instead of 30. So a lot of what we've kept out of momentum is actually on purpose. But aside from the number of invites, that's about it. Everything else we've left out on purpose.
Well, it sounds like you're having to do some type of coaching to get people all on the same page about this. So what does a typical discussion look like when you're using deal momentum?
Mm-hmm. So what you can do is 0 is bad. So when we put together a lot of our reports inside of HubSpot, if you see a deal that has 0 momentum, and because it's on a weekly basis, it means that every week you can look at your deals and say, what are my zeros? Where are my zeros? If I have a 0 momentum, it's like, why is it at 0? Is it because I don't have a meeting this week, but I have one 2 weeks from now? If that's the case, okay, I should probably send a demo. Or if I have nothing scheduled and I haven't sent a demo in the last 2 weeks, I should probably send a demo out and get that viewed by the person. So you can start with your zeros and say, what should I do today to get that number up? So that's the first place to coach. The second place you can coach is the reverse of that. So look at your deals that have sky high momentum and say, why are these so good? Why are they so high? Is this because we're meeting frequently? Is this like, it seems like this one's going to close. So how can I really make sure I close this? Or maybe is there an opportunity to potentially expand the number of licenses? Or should we think about this as an early expansion if we really land the implementation? So you can think about it on that scale. And then in addition to that, if you're looking at your deals and you see one that has had 0 momentum for 3, 4, 5 weeks, no matter what you've done to try and resurrect it, that should be your cue to admit defeat, close it out, say this one's not going anywhere, I should revisit it, or figure out if there's something else I could have done during that period. So it makes a very easy, simple number to look at where you can say, if it's low, what can I do? If it's high, let's make sure we keep it high and close that as soon as possible. And if it's somewhere in the middle or trending up, trending down, you make sure your actions on what works, meetings and demo views, you continue doing that.
Awesome. We have a question from Dano. When did you implement this momentum and what was the change in the score since implementing it?
Yes. So when we first implemented it, we saw it I think it was somewhere in the teens when we first started. And once we first implemented it, just getting people to start looking at the score had it increased by about 50%. And that's aggregated over all the deals we have that were open at the time. So it went from the teens into about the 20s, right? And from there, we were able to continue coaching on it. And since when we started, the average deal momentum has almost tripled by this point. And so now the numbers are reflective of a far higher close rate. And part of this was we just weren't recording the data properly. So when we first kicked this off, there were a lot of deals where the contact wasn't appropriately associated, or maybe the the meeting wasn't in there or the demo view wasn't correct. And that actually had a secondary effect, which was it made our data cleaner, because suddenly a spotlight was put on this deal to say, why is this so low? Why is this so low? And a not insignificant number of times our account executives would say, no, I actually have a weekly meeting with this person. It's just not being reflected. And so what that allowed us to do is discover, why is this the case? Let's go ahead and fix it. And now that we fixed it, we have better data in our CRM. So part of it, or a lot of it, was coaching and just having eyes on this and having a better, knowing where to focus our energy, what to do in every week when we're thinking about deals. But part of it was also just fixing up our data. And that made a huge difference for the cleanliness of our CRM and pipeline management, which has become a lot easier and better to predict.
Oh, you can't see Dano, but I'm imagining Dano's doing this. He's shaking his head, yes. People probably always want to know when they hear information like this. So you've done this, you've seen the transformation. Where do you go next? Where do you see the next step in this?
Well, we got to rerun the model, because as with any indicator, when you are starting to use it and coaching to it and changing it, it will change. So we got to redo this and make sure that that number, that magic number of getting to like 35 is still a 50% close rate. So we got to redo the numbers there, but then also taking this framework and applying it towards customer success, applying it towards lead scoring, applying it towards other ways to measure deal velocity and momentum, and also just seeing if there's any other statistic that has a lot of power to it. So we know meetings and we know consensus demo views do invites for consensus demos do that as well. The sky's the limit. It's really, we have this framework now and we can start applying it outside of specifically sales and start thinking about it on marketing, client success, buyer enablement, wherever we need to go with it. We can start applying this.
I like that. Let's see. Any more questions in the chat? I want to encourage people. There's 81 of us bright-minded individuals. Feel free. This is your time. Oh, Mark wants to know a qualified buying group metric.
Qualified buying group metric.
Sounds.
Yeah, I mean this is, like I said, this is predicting win rates. So you can also use this to do qualification standards. That's part of the reason why when you in consensus can choose what you're very interested and not very interested in. There's no reason why we couldn't start saying, given certain things that you've chosen, does this qualify or not qualify you? Like, there's no reason we can't start applying it. It does require some data analysis, but if you keep it simple and not try and throw everything to the AI wolves, you can tend to find some really powerful explanatory things in just items that make sense. Like if you meet with someone, that should have an impact, a positive impact. And to Mark's point, like, why not start using qualification criteria from this? That's a direction, that's a frontier we want to go to as well.
I'm glad that we got you away from politics and into.
Oh, I'm glad I'm away from politics too.
We have 2 minutes left. Lightning round. Feel free to drop your questions in the chat or the QA box. If not, Matt, feel free to share more information.
Any wisdom or knowledge? I think I wisdom knowledged myself out. I too am probably gonna have to lay down after this, just like I think Mark said he has to do as well. I at least need more water. Hopefully I'm not going completely hoarse.
Well, I just honestly want to thank you again for sharing your insights and knowledge. And this was amazing. I'm lucky to work with you, so I get to hear you talk more and make us better. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and give you back your time. I want to thank everyone for showing up today, asking your questions, being as engaged in the chat as you could be. And with that, I want to say thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.